It makes me feel
And
happy that he's
yeah,
not there anymore.
understanding you're
But
responsible for it, yeah.
when I place myself in the exact moment depicted in that crucifix, that makes me feel guilty. I don't feel guilty currently, I'm not sitting around guilty about it. But if I'm standing there looking at my Lord on the cross, I feel incredibly guilty and I want to weep.
Because it's our sin that put him there.
Yeah, we are responsible, but that's not like the word guilt feels wrong. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, it's our fault that he even had to be on that cross in the first place. I think that's what Victor's trying to get at.
Yeah, but if you can't look at that and see it as a victory, I don't understand.
I look at the empty tomb and see that as a victory.
Yeah, but this is the work done. Like this is what's interesting. Protestants go to church on Palm Sunday, and then that entire week they go and live their life, and then it goes Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday, and Easter Sunday is the resurrection. Oh yay, everything's done. They like miss that entire liturgical period in between of the
Even if
holy
you
days
want to
where
say
Christ
that.
is his actual passion.
Yeah, while he's alive, suffering on the.
The economic techniques of action. At the same time that the economist has created a technique for knowing, he has created a technique for acting. A new world is awakening, and economic mutation is being effected. Among these techniques of intervention, we shall consider only two: plan and norms. The establishment of norms by the economists has become necessary. Dieterlian tells us simply, in order to follow and understand economic development, a good example of the transition from techniques of understanding to techniques of action. The establishment of norms by the economists has become necessary simply in order to follow and understand economic development. A good example of the transition from techniques of understanding to techniques of action. It is not sufficient merely to follow the course of statistical data. It is necessary to erect in advance a system of norms of progression of the elements of a given economic system, which will permit us at any moment to estimate the divergence of a given element of the system from the norm. Even in a non-directed economy, it is possible to determine a certain relation among the different economic components, b, a normal tendency for the evolution of each of their relation. Oh, fuck's sake. I read that wrong. Even in a non-directed economy, it is possible to determine a certain relation among the different economic components, b, a normal tendency for the evolution of each of these elements, and consequently, c, a normal evolution of their relation. When such a scheme has been established, it is then possible to say whether one of the elements is progressing too rapidly or too slowly, a fact which, in Dieterlian's opinion, should serve to reveal the causes of an economic crisis. But if we thus establish certain norms of progression, we are confronted with two facts. First, the necessity of intervention. Once the norm has been set and a condition which diverges from it has been observed, it would be folly to permit a dangerously abnormal phenomenon to develop. Second, the possibility of extending such an establishment of norms. Why should inquiry be limited to a given system? Once a calculus of norms is possible, it ought to be extended throughout the economy. This legislative tendency will operate not merely in the area of the organization of labor. A bureau for settling standards or a service of industrial analysis is no longer limited to the coordination, say, of wages and of the scientific organization of labor. These operations transcend the level of private enterprise and attain the level of the general. They harmonize the complementary activities of wide economic sectors. We are then completely within the technique of intervention. The transition from the one to the other has been imperceptible. If the term norm is taken in its exact meaning, it is evident that the application of the system of norms orients us in a unique direction. Under capitalism, norms are fundamental to the planning of enterprise, but the tempo of production remains a function of market conditions. In a planned economy, norms are fundamental to all economic calculations. They determine the quantities to be produced and measure the degree to which the plan is realized in the market. The technique of normalization can only have full scope in a planned economy. It tends, in proportion to its development, to imply a planned economy, simply because it tends to pass from private planning in an atomized economy to a global economy and general planning, the fundamental condition of its application. A global economy is more exact to the degree that both these aspects of planning are subject to the law and control of the machine, as mass indicates. All this represents a tendency rather than an accomplished fact. As soon as industrial normalization intervenes, it brings with it this tendency, which inevitably devalues the older economic types and the older industrial organizations. Norms mutually entail each other and presuppose certain synchronizations. It is almost impossible to conceive of localized norms. If it is asked what the motive force behind this tendency is, once again we must answer efficiency. The logic of norms was clearly evident in the application in Britain in 1940 of the National Research Project. Research on the measure of production and its practical consequences spread like a slick of oil and brought the whole of industry into line. It has been praised as political economy entering into action. This chain reaction is only a tendency at the moment. It is claimed that counteracting factors, economic and human, will prevent it from becoming a reality. But these other factors are not technical. The competition is between divergent forces, the one technical and the others not. And in our society, the technical factor must prevail over others. I therefore believe that in this area too, the logic of norms will impose itself everywhere. And if in my analysis of this development I seem to have isolated the technical factor, this is not because I chose to neglect or fail to recognize the others, but, as I have already demonstrated, the technical factor is at present the decisive one. In addition, most of the other developmental factors are well known and almost universally studied, whereas the technical factor remains in general obscure. As soon as norms become essential because of their obvious utility, they appear to complement the plan. There is no better means of coordinating them or permitting them their full efficiency than to integrate them into a plan. This is what I mean by the logic of norms. Another technique of intervention which has recently become essential, and which I shall only mention, is so-called operational research. Its basic characteristics, its objectives, and its meaning are identical with those norms. But the problem here is a problem of decision. Norms and operational research are today the two means by which the plan is executed. Planning represents a second aspect of the economic technique of intervention. Everyone has an approximate idea of what planning means. The state decides everything and regulates everything in advance. We must analyze at least the characteristics of the planning operation, if not its details. Economic planning is a variety of technique in a form or system or an economic theory. Not a single economy of any type whatsoever has been constructed by means of planning. We think otherwise because the Russian adventure has always appeared to us as such in such a guise. It was desired to build an economy of the collective type, and to succeed in this, a plan was elaborated. But the Russian plan assumed its own meaning independently of all theoretical ideas. In reality, the plan is a technique and ipso facto indifferent to doctrines and opinions. It is at least of all concerned with principles or of action. In Germany, no one had any very clear concept of the economic form that should be adopted, but planning was accepted as an efficient means. In our own day, it is even more true that plans develop in all countries without any foundation of economic doctrine. This, in one sense, is very reassuring. People constantly say, if we remain true to our old doctrine, and the plan is only an instrument, we remain what we were. If planning has sometimes functioned as a socialist instrument, it was only because it was in the service of a socialist doctrines. This is a consolation, illusory, but it is at least founded on the truth that planning is not connected with any particular doctrine. System or not, however, it perhaps implies a certain definite form of economy. A second observation leads us to insist on the importance of ways and means, and the establishment of the plan. The plan is not merely a set of commands or some general orientation. There are two focuses in the plan. There is the choice of objectives, the direction to give an economic system its ensemble. There is also the most concrete possible anticipation of the means needed to reach these objectives. Economic choice of objectives and the establishment of corresponding means, such is the plan. But this choice and these means are elaborated in the most rational possible way, and a whole complex of techniques of application enables the user to avoid arbitrariness. With regard to the techniques of the formation of a plan, we refer the reader to the works of Charles Bettelheim. Now let us consider a great difficulty, which is an important point of discussion in modern planning: prices and wages. Until now, the plan has been more or less tied to real prices and wages. Planning, if not actually established by the market, was at least fixed in temporal or spatial relation to market prices and wages. But this situation could not last long. The intention of the Third Soviet Plan was precisely to fix prices and wages in a purely abstract, but not arbitrary, way by certain economic methods, or econometric methods, independently of the laws of the market. It would seem from the various wage manipulations which took place in 1949 and the repudiation of Vosnesensky that this attempt was not a success. However, we must consider it as the only logical way in which planning could have been undertaken, and this approach may very well be eliminated by new improvements in economic technique. This would set to rest the objections of Francois Perrault, from whom the plan was thereby deprived of all economic rationality. A plan is executed in accordance with two consistent principles: efficiency and social need. The plan first answers the constant search for the most efficient use of mechanical means, natural riches, and disposable forces. The problem is to organize, coordinate, and normalize these elements in such a way that each instrument produces its maximum yield. Planning has been criticized on all fronts, from the philosophic to the economic, but no one has yet questioned the fundamental efficiency of planning except at the beginning. This criticism had its origin in two things: the gropings of the planners and the ignorance of the critics. Everyone has since become convinced that the mechanism is efficient, with allowances for a certain bluff that up to now has accompanied planning experiments. As far as technique is concerned, Judgment is based solely on efficiency, and planning appears fully justified in this respect. The second of the two principal criteria of planning is the satisfaction of social needs. The initial difficulty is to determine just what these needs are at a given moment. How shall we effect the balance between social needs and production? Theoretically, these are insoluble questions. I say theoretically advisedly. The proposed means, opinion polls, ration cards, obligatory absorption by the buyer of whatever is produced, indicate that the question as it is usually posed is abstract. If one says, in planning, the consumer is in command, one is making abstraction from the fact that the plan, a sociological phenomenon, answers to a social need and not to individual need. At the same time, one is thinking of an abstract man, a kind of fixed image of a man, and this, too, renders the proposed question inoperative. The social man envisaged by the plan is a man integrated more and more into modern technical society. His needs are more and more collectivized, not indeed by direct pressure, but by publicity, standardization of goods, intellectual uniformity, and so on. It is well known that to the standardization of production corresponds to a standardization of taste, which gives to social life its collective character. Moreover, mass consumption corresponds spontaneously to mass production. There is no need for repressive measures. The adaptation of the public occurs of itself. The average man becomes the norm in the most liberal system in the world because only the products necessary to the average man are offered on the market. In fact, the problem of understanding social needs is complicated only if planning technique is separated from all other techniques. These other techniques spontaneously lead man to feel certain social needs conformable to certain data. When the plan is reinserted into its true framework, it is evident that there is no need of forcing social needs. They are prepared in advance, so that the plan is in a position to correspond exactly to them after a more or less difficult period of adaptation. The whole evolution of human needs in their sociologism tends toward the plan. There is almost no necessity any longer to exert pressure on these needs. They are already what they should be, provided that we abandon human misfits to the miserable lot, a procedure which is, in any case, the course of all techniques. When it is a question of dominating the world, one cannot stop to consider Kyrgyz shepherds or Bantu huntsmen who will not accept the laws of the determining forces. Planning does not pretend to produce an immediate response to all social needs. As I have said, there is choice. It is choice which can render certain persons unhappy, but not hopeless, because the plan is inserted into a dynamic conception of the economy. The equilibrium between production and consumption is neither static, nor does it exist at present. It is to come and will constantly renew itself. The choice effected at a given moment is placed in a general perspective which makes this choice relative and at the same time subordinate to subsequent foreseeable development. It is necessary, therefore, to consider both the future of realization and the mechanism of uniformization of needs, which I've already mentioned. This leads the two lines to come together constantly. This is an element of the dialectical view of the economy, which is the only one admissible today. During the realization of a plan, a constant readaptation of means and ends is simultaneously effected, assuring a greater cohesion of the ensemble, if not greater certainty of realization. Finally, it seems to me important, in connection with the plan itself, to emphasize the need for utilizing the labor force efficiently. It would appear that full employment is an internal necessity, not merely a momentary circumstance of the plan. Charles Beetlheim has demonstrated that without full employment, there is no possible satisfaction of the totality of social needs. In this connection, wages change their character and become a part of the social product. The plan ought, therefore, to provide for both full employment and the assignment of the labor force in accordance with the requirements of the production plan. It becomes indispensable to extend the plan to the whole labor force. Without this, the mechanism cannot function, and this then poses the question of the place, of the limitation, of the characteristics of planning. One need not yield to the puerile enthusiasm that considers planning a panacea, a polyvalent remedy like penicillin. But it is necessary to put the plan into a different perspective. Whatever the remedies or proposed reforms for resolving injustice and incoherence in the modern economy, everything occurs through the agency of the plan. The plan in itself is no solution, but it is the indispensable instrument of all solutions. Even if one starts with Knut Wicksell or John Maynard Keynes, one meets again and again the urgency of planning. In Mumford's proposals to release man from the clutches of technique, there is an interesting project for an economic regionalism on a worldwide plan. But this regionalism can, in fact, only be based on the exceedingly complete and rigid planning of production and distribution. I don't like this economic shit. But we're like nearly halfway through the book. So that's cool.